Hi, thanks for watching. I am going to be reviewing The Witch Would Not by Olivia Atwater. This is the first book by Olivia Atwater that I've read, and I can foresee me just binge reading all of her books in the future. I hope that as a reader, you have a genre or an author or at least a single book that will pull you out of reality and have you so enamored with the story, with the world that the author created, with the characters, that it's jarring to move out of the reading back into the real world because it's a feeling that, like no other. And I'm sure if you're watching this channel, then you're an avid reader and you've had that happen. But if you haven't, you just gotta keep reading until you find it. This is going to be on my list of favorite books at some point because this is this was so perfect for me. This was a dark gothic fantasy book. It starts with Winifred Hall coming to the Witchwood Manor, which is surrounded by the Witchwood Forest. She's come because one of her old friends has requested that she come and help her out at the manor. She's an elderly lady. Winifred assumes that when she says that she's asking her to be a governess, that she didn't know what else to call her position of employment. Winifred doesn't like children. Winifred's never liked children. Even when she was a child, she didn't like children. And so when she arrives and her friend tells her, I need you to watch over my grandson Robert until September, which is when he's supposed to go to Eton, out to school to Eton, and promise me that you'll make sure that he leaves, that you'll make sure that he's safe. Now, Winifred understands that there's something else going on here because when she arrived at Witchwood Manor, she was greeted at the door by a butler with red eyes, wine red eyes, who called himself Mr. Quincy. And he was, I really don't know how else to say, he was kind of snarky when he introduced himself. She asked him to assist her with her baggages, and he outright refused. But then when she got her luggage inside, he did end up taking her luggage up to her room for her. When she mentioned this to the cook as she was going around meeting the other people in the household, the cook said they don't have a butler. And she goes, "Where did you hear that name, Mr. Quincy?" And she told him, the butler opened the door for me. She's like, "We have nobody here by that name. We haven't had a butler in a while because the last butler quit." Now, the servants in the household, so there's very few. Let's make that clear. There's very few. There's the cook, and then there's Margaret, who doesn't stay at the manor. She doesn't sleep there like the other servants. She refuses. And now there's Winifred, and she agrees to she agrees to be the governess for the grandson Robert. Um, but she finds that everybody's really weird about the fairies. They're pretending like they don't believe in fairies, and she comes to find out that her friend's son, Lord Longfell, has strictly forbidden anybody from talking about fairies, from claiming that they exist. He insists that they don't exist. And to go along with his claim, the fairies of England have been disappearing steadily over the last so many years, which is part of the reason that Winifred is there. She is trying to find her friend, the Lady Hollowvale. So right off the bat, she knows that there's fairies in the house, but she doesn't know the extent to which she doesn't know what she has stepped into. So when she goes to sleep, she finds the others, the other people who are employed and staying at the house. She finds them in her dreams, and they go. It's I don't really know how to explain it. So if you can imagine like a mirror world, if you watch Stranger Things, it's similar to the Upside Down, but it's more wild fairy. So the hallways are longer. There's a piano fort in the conservatory, and the piano fort in the Mirror Fairy Dream World is wild. Like it's made of branches and brambles, and it's big, and there's a lot of differences there. And she realizes that you can see out into the real Witchwood Manor through the mirrors in Witchwood Not, which is what this mirror dream world is called. It's called the Witchwood Not. And there's a lot of fairies there, as she comes to realize. And slowly she learns the story of what's happened. So Mr. Longfell has cut down the trees in the Witchwood Forest to make this manor, which really angered the fairies of Witchwood Forest. And they were punishing the people of the town because the people of the town knew that they weren't supposed to cut down the woods, but Lord Longfell basically starved them into submission until they did his bidding and built his house out of the wood, out of the trees from Witchwood Forest. He also employed some magicians to do some iron and blood magic to trap the fairies of Witchwood Forest inside the Witchwood Knot, and they cannot escape. And this is part of the reason why the fairies of England have been kind of disappearing. There's a lot of them in the Witchwood Knot. And the the grandson can see the faces that come out of the walls at some points. But his father has him so convinced that fairies don't exist that when Winifred starts telling him about fairies, he doesn't believe her. But in the Witchwood Knot, while she's dreaming and she's in this alternate Witchwood Manor, she starts playing cards um, with Mr. Quincy and the cook. And the closest I can think of, if it's like a tarot you kind of game. I didn't really know how to explain it. That's what I got from the story. It's a tarot euchre kind of game. And they 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 wager questions. And so because Winifred knows that she can't give the fairies her real name because they can use it to make her do things that she doesn't want to do. And um, the fairies want to know her true fear, or Mr. Quincy wants to know her biggest fear, and she understands that he wants to use it against her. And they do this on a regular basis. But then she finds out that her friend, the Dowager, the one that asked her to come watch her grandson, she finds that she's dying. And she finds that despite all the walls that she's built around herself since she was a child, and I won't go into what happened when she was a child because it's really spoilery, but she comes to find that all these walls that she's built around herself since she was a child have kind of started coming down around her friend. And so when her friend dies, she's devastated. And the grandson seems devastated too. And his grandson is something else. Okay, so because when she first gets there and the grandson arrives, he doesn't want to stay there. He wants to go with his father, but his father, Lord Longfell, refuses to stay in the manor. Even though he claims that fairies don't exist, he refuses to stay in the manor. And the grandson wants to go with him, but he doesn't. The father won't let him. And then she leaves the grandson, Robert, alone in his room. She goes, I'm going to go fetch you some tea. And when she comes back, he's gone. He's escaped the manor and has been running through Witchwood Forest after his father. And she doesn't know he's left yet at this point. And I know I'm bouncing around a little bit. I'm sorry. He's really like, so she's she's looking for him, and she runs into Mr. Quincy, and she asks him, "I need you to tell me where Robert is. Do you know where he's at?" He's like, I can't remember what he did. He was snarky and sarcastic, but then he eventually told her he's run off to Witchwood Forest, which, by the way, has a monster in it. And so Winifred, is thinking, fairy monster, like cryptid monster. What kind of monster? But he won't talk. So sometimes I'll talk to Robert, and she ends up sliding down a ravine with her right now. And she hears somebody laughing at her. She looks up, and Robert's up in a tree. And Robert's father, Lord Longfield, I'm not sure where he came from, but he was up there, and he's like, "What, you've run away already? You know, what are you doing?" And he's yelling at his son, and then he realizes that Winifred is there. And at this point, he hadn't met Winifred, and he comes and he helps her up, and he's got his arm around her, holding her steady a little too long. He's staring at her a little, like a few 2 seconds too many. And it becomes clear that he expects women to kind of fall all over him because he's a rich lord and whatever and whatnot. And he's a male, I guess, basically is the explanation of why he expects women to fall all over him. But he makes Winifred really uncomfortable. And he invites her back to his cabin, and she's like, "No," she's like, "I'm gonna take care of your grandson. I'm really sorry this happened. I'm really sorry we met this way, but it's not gonna happen again." And after a little back and forth, he finally relents and lets her go back to the manor, and he follows her. Uh, so he follows her back, and they're talking, and he goes up and sees his mother. And after he leaves, Winifred is very clear with her friend. She's like, I'm here for you. I'm doing you this favor. I don't like your son, and I don't want your son to like me." And she understands. I don't know that there was anything that she could really do at that point. Um, but a little while later, like I think it's like a day or two, maybe a couple days later, she realizes that her friend is dead, and her friend um, has asked her. She's basically said, "This is my last wish. You just need to protect Robert. I will give you some really nice clothing when I'm dead, and you can wear it, and whatnot." Um, but Winifred at this point is really disturbed. So after the grandmother dies, the grandson Robert seems to be in a state of shock almost, because he's not saying a lot. When he does respond, they're one word responses. He just kind of stares off into the distance. He doesn't eat unless he's told. All of his, all of his wild, Dennis the Menace kind of attitude has gone out of him. And it doesn't take Winifred long to realize that it's not Robert. That at some point when she was away from Robert, the fairies got him and they replaced him with a fetch. And I'm fairly certain that I've heard the term foundling referred to this before, but in this book it's called fetch. I think my dogs are on my table eating something. Anyway, um, I think my dogs. I don't even. I'm eating so much trouble right now. I don't even understand what they're doing. They're making so much noise over there. But so she realizes that Robert's been replaced with a fetch, and the fetch doesn't really talk much. But she leaves him in his room, and she says, "You need to stay here. I'm gonna go try to find the real Robert." And so at night, while she's asleep and dreaming, she gets Mr. Quincy, and she convinces him that's not right. She gets Mr. Quincy, and I can't remember exactly what it that she did that entrapped him in this debt to her, but he is going to help her find Robert. And so they go down underneath the kitchens, they go down some stairs, and there's this labyrinth type place, and it's full of these crazy things. So the first night that they're there, they're being followed by these humongous, um, I would say like toy soldier type things that are made of wood. And it's during this time that they're down there, and she's seeing these toy soldiers that Mr. Quincy tells her this house is made of Witchwood forest, and the trees that were cut down were people, humans, other fairies, other entities that the Lady Morningwood turned into trees. Mr. Quincy is in debt to the Lady Morningwood, and Winifred thinks at this point that that's probably what happened to her friend, the Lady Hollowvale, and that she needs to either defeat or trick the Lady Morningwood into releasing all of the fairies and the servants and everything and returning Robert. And so they're going through this maze trying to get to where she could talk to the Lady Morningwood, and these these toy soldiers come after her, and they're made of wood, and they are also made of wood from the Witchwood forest. And after she dies in this world and wakes up and realizes that she just because she died in the dream world that she didn't die in the real world, which surprised her. Um, she she sees these toy soldiers in the conservatory, I think, and they 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 grate at her nerves because of what happened while she was sleeping, and so she throws them all on the fire. And the next time she falls asleep and her and Mr. Quincy go down into this place, like they find the melted remnants of them. And he's like, "Did you know?" She's like, "I did not know that I was actually burning the huge, however big they were, toy soldiers that were here last time. No, I did not know." And she has Oliver now. I haven't mentioned Oliver before, which is really bad. It's faux pas. So Oliver, she's brought this skull of a cat with her, and it's her familiar. And in the waking world, Oliver is just a skull, but in the dream world, Oliver is this one-eyed cat. And in my head, it's the cat from the last unicorn, the pirate cat. But that's not entirely correct because I think it had all four legs. But it can morph from like a little kitten, like a little cat, into a humongous lion type beast, bigger than like the lions of our world. It was pretty incredible. It kept the fairies at bay. It kept them away from Winifred. It scared Mr. Quincy significantly. And Mr. Quincy is something of an enigma in the story. He is not the butler, really, but he is so ingrained in the household, in the house. Um, he's a part of the household, whether or not other people acknowledge him or see him or not. He's also got a rat tail, and so the red wine eyes, I think, are part of that persona that he embodies. But you really dislike him at the beginning because he's really snarky, um, not just a little rude and tricky. He's very tricky. He would have made. I mean, if they had said that he was actually Loki, then it wouldn't have surprised me. But it turns out that he is not what Winifred thinks he is, and as the story goes on, he begrudgingly finds himself helping Winifred in ways that he's trying not to help her. He's trying not to help her. He's trying not to feel for her. He's trying not to like her. He's trying not to pity her. He's trying to just make her leave. But as the story goes on, you kind of feel this relationship building. At first, it's kind of like a frenemies type thing, I guess I would say. But as you progress, the relationship gets stronger, and it's a really interesting progression of character in both of them. Um, and again, I'm trying not to reveal too much as spoilery stuff as I can, but it was a really phenomenal book. And I've gone on and on and on, even though I still have this little bout of arthritis and my side is hurting because I've been sitting in this chair longer than I probably should after surgery. But um, it was a really good book. This is going to be on my list of favorite books. It made me so happy. I can't explain it. I mean, you would have to be me to understand why I love this book so much. It was just, it was fairy, it was fae, it was wild, it was dark, it had music elements to it, like a lot of musical elements to it. With turning the people into the trees, the gothic element, like it was just such a perfect book for me. I loved it so much. Um, so this one, like if you go and you look at my Goodreads review, it's gonna be a glowing star review. This might not be your cup of tea. If you're into more realistic elements of storytelling and not necessarily fairy tales, then this might not be your cup of tea. But I mean, it was dark. I mean, I have to admit, like, there's parts in there that were bloody, and there's parts that were sincerely disturbing. I mean, and it touches on, you know, I'm laughing, about how Winifred was turned off by Mr. Longfeld, but it was so much more than that because he was he was obsessed with her, and I don't know whether it's because she acted or she wasn't really acting, but I don't know whether it was because she didn't fall all over him and start falling over him that he was obsessed with her. He was obsessed with her to a point that it was disgusting and dark. Um, and so it touches on these, really deep things in the book, but at the same time, it's still a fairy tale, and it's a incredibly beautifully dark fairy tale, and I loved it. I'm going to stop ranting about it now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. And subscribe below. Did I say thank you to NetGalley? Thank you to NetGalley for providing an EARC of this book in exchange for an honest review. Here's my honest review. It's a glowing review, and it is coming out on November 28th. So this is going to be one of those ARCs that I'm like, there, as soon as it drops, I'm going to be buying it. So, anyways, one more time, thanks for watching. I can subscribe below.